The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence's house as Charles walked through the corridors, his mind heavy with the weight of recent family tensions. The past few months had been particularly challenging, with various members of the royal family finding themselves at odds over matters both personal and public. Kate had been bearing the brunt of much criticism, and Charles could see how it was affecting not just her, but William and the children as well. As he made his way to his study, Charles reflected on how different things had become since his accession to the throne. The responsibilities felt heavier now, the scrutiny more intense, and the family dynamics more complex than ever before. Kate, who had always conducted herself with such grace and dignity, had recently become the target of unfair criticism from various quarters, including some uncomfortable tensions within the family itself. The relationship between Camilla and Kate had always been cordial on the surface, but Charles was not blind to the underlying currents of tension. Camilla, having fought her own battles for acceptance within the royal family and the public eye, sometimes seemed to view Kate's natural popularity with a mixture of admiration and something that bordered on resentment. It was a delicate situation that Charles found himself navigating more frequently than he would have liked. That particular morning, Charles had received word that there would be a family gathering to discuss upcoming royal engagements and the distribution of duties. These meetings, while necessary for the smooth functioning of the monarchy, often became pressure cookers where personal grievances could bubble to the surface. Charles knew that Kate had been dreading this particular meeting, as recent media coverage had been particularly harsh regarding her choices in royal engagements and her approach to certain charitable causes. The criticism had been unfair and often factually incorrect, but it had nonetheless taken its toll. Charles had watched as Kate's usual confidence seemed to waver slightly in recent weeks. She continued to perform her duties with her characteristic warmth and professionalism, but those closest to her could see the strain beginning to show. William had confided in his father about his concerns for Kate's well-being, and Charles had assured him that the family would provide the support she needed. As the family began to gather in the formal sitting room at Clarence's house, Charles observed the body language and interactions carefully. Kate arrived with William, looking elegant as always, but with a slight tension in her shoulders that Charles immediately noticed. She greeted everyone politely, her smile genuine, but perhaps not quite reaching her eyes in the way it usually did. Camilla was already present, engaged in conversation with other family members, her voice carrying that particular tone she adopted when she felt the need to assert her position. The agenda for the meeting seemed straightforward enough: discussions about upcoming state visits, charity patronages, and the coordination of public appearances. However, Charles could sense the undercurrents of tension in the room. There had been recent media reports suggesting conflicts within the family about the allocation of high-profile engagements, and while these reports were largely speculative, they had clearly affected the dynamics between various family members. As the meeting progressed, the conversation initially remained civil and focused on practical matters. Kate contributed thoughtfully to discussions about her charitable work, particularly her initiatives focused on early childhood development and mental health awareness. Her passion for these causes was evident, and Charles felt a surge of pride at how seriously she took her royal responsibilities and how genuinely she cared about making a positive impact. However, as the discussion moved toward more sensitive topics regarding media coverage and public perception, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. There were subtle comments about the need for consistency in royal messaging and the importance of presenting a united front to the public. While these comments were not directly critical of Kate, they carried implications that were clearly making her uncomfortable. Charles noticed how Kate's posture became more rigid as certain comments were made, particularly those that seemed to question her judgment in recent public appearances. The criticism was veiled but unmistakable, and Charles could see that Kate was struggling to maintain her composure while remaining respectful and diplomatic in her responses. The turning point came when the conversation shifted to a recent charity event that Kate had organized independently. The event had been a tremendous success, raising significant funds and awareness for early childhood development programs. However, some family members seemed to view Kate's independent initiative as overstepping boundaries or not properly coordinating with established royal protocols. Camilla, who had been relatively quiet during the earlier parts of the meeting, suddenly became more vocal in her opinions about the proper procedures for royal charitable work. Her comments, while couched in terms of protecting the integrity of royal traditions, carried a clear undertone of criticism directed at Kate's approach. She spoke about the importance of experience and the dangers of enthusiasm without proper guidance from more senior family members. Kate listened to these comments with visible restraint, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she maintained her diplomatic demeanor. Charles could see the hurt in her eyes, particularly as the criticism seemed to intensify and become more personal. Other family members remained largely silent, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere where Kate appeared to be facing criticism alone. The situation escalated when Camilla made a comment about the need for newer family members to remember their place within the established hierarchy. While she didn't mention Kate by name, the implication was clear to everyone in the room. It was at this moment that Charles realized the situation was moving beyond acceptable bounds, and that his intervention would be necessary. Charles had always prided himself on maintaining family harmony while ensuring that each member felt valued and supported. He understood the delicate balance required in managing both personal relationships and institutional responsibilities. However, watching Kate being subjected to what he perceived as unfair and inappropriate criticism activated his protective instincts, both as a father-in-law and as the head of the family. The room fell silent as Charles cleared his throat, preparing to address the situation that had developed. Kate looked toward him with a mixture of gratitude and apprehension, clearly hoping for support, but perhaps not wanting to cause further family conflict. William's jaw was visibly tense as he struggled with his own desire to defend his wife while maintaining respect for family protocols. Charles understood that his response in this moment would set important precedents for how family disagreements would be handled in the future. He needed to address the immediate situation while also establishing clear boundaries about acceptable behavior within family discussions. The monarchy's strength depended not just on public perception but on internal cohesion and mutual respect among family members. As he prepared to speak, Charles reflected on the many challenges Kate had faced since joining the family and how admirably she had handled the pressures of royal life. She had brought fresh energy and genuine compassion to her royal duties, and her popularity with the public was a valuable asset to the monarchy. More importantly, she was William's wife and the mother of his grandchildren, deserving of respect and support regardless of any personal or professional disagreements. The weight of his position as both king and patriarch was evident as Charles considered how to address the situation in a way that would protect Kate while maintaining family unity. He knew that his words in this moment would be remembered and would influence future family dynamics. The challenge was to be firm enough to establish clear boundaries while remaining diplomatic enough to preserve relationships and avoid creating lasting divisions within the family. Standing slowly from his chair, Charles prepared to deliver what would become a defining moment in the family's recent history. The protection he was about to offer Kate would demonstrate his commitment to fair treatment and respect for all family members, regardless of their position in the royal hierarchy. His intervention would mark a clear statement about his values as both a king and a family leader, setting the tone for how such situations would be handled in the future. The silence in the room was palpable as everyone waited to see how Charles would respond to the brewing conflict. Kate sat quietly, her dignity intact despite the difficult circumstances, while others in the room seemed to realize that a significant moment was unfolding before them. The next few minutes would prove crucial in defining relationships and establishing precedents that would influence the family's dynamics for years to come. Charles rose from his chair with the measured grace that had been instilled in him from childhood, his presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The morning light streaming through the tall windows of Clarence's house seemed to catch the determination in his eyes as he prepared to address what had become an increasingly uncomfortable situation. Kate remained seated, her posture straight and dignified despite the obvious strain she was experiencing from the criticism that had been directed her way. Taking a moment to survey the room and make eye contact with each family member present, Charles spoke with a calm authority that left no doubt about his position on the matter unfolding before them. His voice carried the weight of both his royal authority and his personal conviction as he began to address the situation that had developed during their family meeting. I believe we need to pause for a moment and consider the direction this conversation has taken, Charles said, his tone measured but firm. This family gathering was intended to discuss our collective responsibilities and how we can best serve the people of our nation. However, it seems we have strayed into territory that is neither productive nor appropriate for our purposes here today. The room remained silent as family members processed his words, clearly understanding that the king was preparing to make a significant statement. Kate looked up at Charles with a mixture of gratitude and relief, while William's tension seemed to ease slightly as he realized his father was stepping in to address the situation. Camilla's expression showed surprise at the directness of Charles's intervention, perhaps not having anticipated such a firm response to what she might have viewed as necessary guidance for a junior family member. Charles continued, his gaze moving deliberately around the room to ensure his message was clearly received by everyone present. Kate has demonstrated nothing but dedication, compassion, and professionalism in her role as a member of this family and in her service to the crown. Her initiatives have brought tremendous positive attention to causes that matter deeply to our people, and her approach has been both innovative and respectful of our traditions. The king's words carried a clear message of support for Kate, but they also served as a gentle but firm correction to those who had been critical. Charles understood the importance of being specific in his praise, not just offering general support, but acknowledging the particular contributions that Kate had made to the royal family's work and reputation. The charity event that was referenced earlier, Charles continued, was an outstanding success that reflected great credit on our family and our commitment to serving others. Kate's leadership in organizing that event demonstrated exactly the kind of initiative and dedication that we should be encouraging and supporting, not questioning or undermining. Kate felt tears threatening to form in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally having someone speak up for her contributions and defend her against the criticism she had been facing. She had maintained her composure throughout the difficult conversation, but Charles's support meant more to her than she could easily express. It wasn't just about having someone defend her actions, but about feeling valued and appreciated as a member of the family. William watched his father with deep admiration, seeing not just the king, but also a man who understood the importance of protecting and supporting family members when they were facing unfair treatment. Charles's intervention demonstrated the kind of leadership that William hoped to emulate when his own time came to lead the family, showing how authority could be used not just to maintain order, but to ensure fairness and protect those who might be vulnerable to criticism or attack. Camilla's reaction was more complex, as she processed Charles's clear rebuke of the direction the conversation had taken. She had not intended to create a confrontational situation, but her comments had clearly crossed a line in Charles's view. The realization that she had misjudged the appropriateness of her criticism was evident in her expression, and she began to understand that her approach had been perceived as inappropriate by the head of the family. Charles was not finished with his intervention, however. He understood that simply defending Kate was not sufficient. He needed to establish clear principles for how family members should interact with each other and how disagreements should be handled in the future. His next words would serve as guidance for all family members about expectations for behavior and treatment of one another. Moving forward, I want to be absolutely clear about how we conduct ourselves in family discussions, Charles stated, his voice maintaining its calm authority. Each member of this family deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their position in our hierarchy or the length of their service to the crown. When we have concerns or suggestions, they should be expressed in a constructive manner that builds up rather than tears down. The king's message was unmistakably clear to everyone in the room. He was establishing boundaries and expectations that would govern future interactions, making it evident that criticism should be constructive and that personal attacks or undermining behavior would not be tolerated. His words carried the weight of royal authority, but they also reflected his personal values about how family members should treat one another. Kate's dedication to her charitable work and her innovation in approaching these important causes represents exactly the kind of engagement that strengthens our family's connection with the people we serve, Charles continued. Rather than questioning such initiatives, we should be celebrating and supporting them. The success of Kate's work reflects well on all of us and advances our collective mission. As Charles spoke, the transformation in the room's atmosphere was palpable. The tension that had been building throughout the meeting began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of clarity about expectations and values. Family members who had remained silent during the earlier criticism began to show signs of agreement with Charles's assessment, nodding slightly as he outlined his vision for how the family should support one another. The king's intervention was particularly significant because it came not just from his position as monarch, but from his role as the head of the family. He was using his authority to protect a vulnerable family member while also establishing important precedents for future interactions. His words carried implications that would influence family dynamics for years to come, making it clear that fairness and mutual support were fundamental values that would be protected and enforced. Kate found herself deeply moved by the comprehensive nature of Charles's defense. He had not simply told others to stop criticizing her. He had specifically acknowledged her contributions, praised her initiatives, and established principles that would protect not just her but any family member who might face similar situations in the future. His intervention demonstrated a level of thoughtfulness and care that went beyond simply resolving the immediate conflict. The other family members in the room were also processing the significance of what they were witnessing. Charles's intervention served as a masterclass in leadership, showing how authority could be used to protect and support while also educating and guiding. His approach was firm but not harsh, clear but not confrontational, demonstrating the kind of balanced leadership that was necessary for managing complex family dynamics within the context of royal responsibilities. William felt a profound sense of gratitude toward his father, not just for defending Kate, but for doing so in a way that maintained family unity while establishing clear boundaries. The intervention showed William that his father understood the challenges that modern royal family members faced and was willing to use his position to ensure fair treatment for all family members. As Charles concluded this portion of his intervention, he looked directly at Kate with an expression of warmth and support. "Kate, your contributions to this family and to our nation have been exemplary. Your dedication, your compassion, and your innovative approach to your royal duties have enhanced our reputation and advanced our mission. You have my full support and confidence, and that will not waver." The direct nature of Charles's support left no room for misinterpretation. He was not offering qualified or conditional backing. He was providing complete and unequivocal support for Kate and her approach to her royal responsibilities. His words would serve as a shield against future criticism and a foundation for Kate's continued confidence in her role within the family. The impact of Charles's intervention extended beyond just the immediate situation. It demonstrated to all family members that the head of the family would not tolerate unfair treatment of any member, regardless of their position or the source of the criticism. This protection applied not just to Kate, but established a principle that would govern all future family interactions, creating a safer and more supportive environment for everyone involved. The silence that followed Charles's strong defense of Kate was profound, filled with the weight of his words and the shifting dynamics they had created in the room. However, this moment of calm was about to be shattered as Camilla, feeling the sting of what she perceived as a public rebuke in front of the family, began to show signs of agitation that would soon escalate into something far more dramatic than anyone in the room could have anticipated. Camilla's face had grown increasingly flushed as Charles spoke, her hands gripping the arms of her chair with a tension that was becoming visible to everyone present. The measured tone and clear support that Charles had offered Kate represented more than just a defense of his daughter-in-law. In Camilla's mind, it felt like a diminishment of her own position and authority within the family hierarchy. The years she had spent establishing herself as a respected member of the royal family seemed suddenly threatened by what she viewed as preferential treatment for Kate. As Charles concluded his supportive comments about Kate, Camilla could no longer contain the emotions that had been building throughout the meeting. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a tremor of anger and frustration that immediately changed the atmosphere in the room from one of resolved tension to one of impending confrontation. "How dare you?" Camilla said, her voice rising with each word. "How dare you suggest that I don't understand proper royal protocol or that my guidance is inappropriate? I have given decades of my life to this family, decades of service and dedication, only to be dismissed and corrected in favor of someone who has barely understood the complexities of royal life." The room froze as Camilla's words hung in the air. Kate felt her heart racing, not from anger but from shock at the intensity of Camilla's response. She had not intended for her presence to create such conflict, and seeing Camilla's obvious distress made her feel deeply uncomfortable despite the protection Charles was offering her. Charles remained standing, his expression calm but alert as he processed Camilla's outburst. He had not expected such a strong reaction, particularly not one that would be expressed so openly in front of other family members. His experience in handling difficult situations served him well, as he prepared to address what was clearly becoming a much more complex confrontation than he had anticipated. "Camilla, I understand that you may feel," Charles began, but he was immediately cut off as Camilla's agitation escalated further. "No, you don't understand." Camilla's voice reached a level that could only be described as a scream, shocking everyone in the room with its intensity. "You have no idea what I have sacrificed, what I have endured, what I have overcome to earn my place in this family. And now you dismiss my experience and wisdom as if they mean nothing, as if my years of service count for nothing compared to her charm and popularity." The transformation in Camilla was startling to witness. The composed, dignified woman who had entered the meeting had been replaced by someone whose emotions had completely overwhelmed her usual restraint. Her screaming continued, becoming more intense and more personal as she unleashed years of accumulated frustration and insecurity. "I have been criticized, vilified, and attacked by the media and the public for decades." Camilla's voice cracked with emotion as she continued her outburst. "I have been called every horrible name imaginable, had my every move scrutinized and condemned, had my character assassinated repeatedly, and yet I persevered. I earned my place here through years of dedicated service and unwavering loyalty, and I will not be lectured about proper behavior by anyone." Kate sat motionless, stunned by the intensity of Camilla's emotional breakdown. She could see the pain behind the anger, the years of accumulated hurt and struggle that were pouring out in this moment. Despite the fact that Camilla's criticism had been directed at her, Kate found herself feeling sympathy for the older woman's obvious distress and the vulnerabilities that her outburst was revealing. William looked between his father and stepmother with growing concern, recognizing that this situation had moved far beyond a simple family disagreement into territory that could have lasting consequences for family relationships. He wanted to support his wife and appreciate his father's defense of her, but he also understood that Camilla's emotional breakdown needed to be handled with care and sensitivity. Charles remained remarkably composed despite the escalating situation, his years of experience in managing crisis situations evident in his steady demeanor. However, those watching carefully could see the determination in his eyes growing stronger as Camilla's outburst continued and became more intense. He was clearly prepared to maintain his protective stance regarding Kate, regardless of how dramatic Camilla's response became. "I have given everything to this family." Camilla's screaming continued, her voice now hoarse with emotion. "I have sacrificed my privacy, my comfort, my relationships, everything that mattered to me personally, all for the sake of this institution and this family. And my reward is to be treated as if my opinions don't matter, as if my experience counts for nothing, as if I am some kind of obstacle to be managed rather than a valued member of this family." The raw emotion in Camilla's words was undeniable, revealing depths of pain and insecurity that she had clearly been carrying for years. Her outburst was not just about the current situation with Kate. It was the release of accumulated frustrations about her position in the family, her relationship with the public, and her constant struggle to be accepted and respected in her role. Other family members in the room watched in stunned silence, unsure how to respond to such an intense emotional display. The usual protocols and courtesies that governed royal family interactions seemed inadequate for dealing with such raw human emotion. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing something unprecedented in their experience of family gatherings. Charles realized that he was facing a moment that would define not just this particular meeting, but potentially his relationship with Camilla and the family dynamics for years to come. His response to her emotional breakdown would need to be carefully calibrated to address her pain while maintaining the principles he had established regarding Kate's treatment and the family's values. "Camilla," Charles said, his voice gentle but firm, "your contributions to this family have never been questioned or diminished. Your service and dedication are deeply appreciated and recognized by everyone here. However, that appreciation cannot come at the expense of treating other family members with anything less than complete respect and fairness." But Camilla was beyond rational conversation at this point. Her emotional floodgates had opened completely, and years of suppressed feelings were pouring out in a torrent that seemed impossible to stop. Her screaming intensified further, becoming almost incoherent as she struggled to express the depth of her hurt and frustration. "You don't understand what it's like to constantly have to prove yourself," she screamed through tears that had now begun flowing freely down her face. "Every day, every public appearance, Every interview, every photograph. I have to be perfect because I know that any mistake will be magnified and used against me. I have to work twice as hard as anyone else to receive half the recognition, and even then, I'm constantly compared unfavorably to others. The desperation in Camilla's voice was heartbreaking to hear, revealing a woman who had been struggling with feelings of inadequacy and insecurity despite her elevated position. Her screaming had become so intense that it was echoing off the walls of the formal sitting room, creating an almost surreal atmosphere where royal protocol had completely broken down in favor of raw human emotion. Charles stood firm in his position, his protective instincts regarding Kate unwavering despite the intensity of Camilla's emotional breakdown. He understood that this moment was about more than just resolving a family dispute. It was about establishing fundamental principles about how family members would treat each other and what standards of behavior would be maintained regardless of personal struggles or insecurities. As Camilla's screaming continued to fill the room, Charles prepared to respond in a way that would address her pain while maintaining the protection he had offered Kate. The moment had become a test of his leadership and his commitment to the values he had articulated, requiring him to balance compassion for Camilla's obvious distress with unwavering support for the principles of respect and fairness that he believed were essential for the family's well-being. The intensity of Camilla's emotional outburst had reached a crescendo that seemed to fill every corner of the elegant sitting room at Clarence's house. Her screaming had become so forceful that it appeared to drain her of energy, yet the raw pain behind her words continued to pour forth with undiminished anguish. Charles remained standing in his position, unwavering in his protective stance, even as the situation had evolved far beyond what anyone could have anticipated when the family meeting began that morning. Through her tears and continued screaming, Camilla's words became increasingly personal and revealing about the depths of her insecurities. "Every single day, I wake up knowing that I will never be Diana," she cried out, her voice breaking with emotion. "Every day I know that no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, no matter how much I sacrifice, I will always be compared to a ghost, to a memory that has been perfected by time and tragedy." The mention of Diana sent a visible shockwave through the room. Kate felt her breath catch, not just at the pain in Camilla's voice, but at the realization of how deeply this comparison had affected her stepmother-in-law over the years. William's expression showed a complex mixture of emotions as his mother's name was invoked in such a raw and painful context. Even Charles, despite his composed exterior, seemed to feel the weight of Camilla's words about his first wife. "I have tried so hard to find my own place, to make my own contribution, to be valued for who I am rather than constantly measured against who I am not." Camilla's screaming continued, her voice hoarse but still carrying the full force of her emotional breakdown. "And just when I think I have achieved some measure of acceptance, some recognition for my own efforts, I am told that my guidance and experience mean nothing compared to someone else's natural charm and public popularity." The pain in Camilla's words was undeniable, revealing a woman who had spent decades struggling with feelings of inadequacy and insecurity despite her elevated position within the royal family. Her emotional breakdown was laying bare the psychological toll of constant comparison, constant scrutiny, and constant pressure to prove herself worthy of her role and position. Charles understood that he was witnessing not just an emotional outburst, but a fundamental crisis of confidence and self-worth that Camilla had apparently been carrying for years. However, his recognition of her pain did not diminish his commitment to protecting Kate from unfair treatment. If anything, Camilla's revelations about her own struggles made it even more important to establish clear boundaries about how family members should treat each other. "Camilla, I hear your pain, and I acknowledge the challenges you have faced," Charles said, his voice maintaining its calm authority despite the emotional chaos surrounding him. "Your struggles have been real, and your perseverance has been admirable. However, your own difficult experiences cannot justify treating other family members with anything less than complete respect and fairness." His words seemed to momentarily penetrate through Camilla's emotional storm, but rather than calming her, they appeared to intensify her distress. She seemed to interpret his response as another dismissal of her feelings and another prioritization of others over her own needs and concerns. "So my pain doesn't matter?" Camilla screamed, her voice reaching levels that seemed to vibrate through the walls of the room. "My years of suffering and struggle count for nothing when measured against protecting someone who has never faced a fraction of what I have endured? Someone who has been welcomed and celebrated from the moment she arrived, while I fought for every ounce of acceptance and respect. The comparison Camilla was making between her own experience and Kate's was both painful and revealing. She was articulating a fundamental sense of injustice about the different receptions they had received from both the public and, in her perception, from the family itself. Her screaming gave voice to years of accumulated resentment about what she viewed as unequal treatment and unequal support. Kate sat listening to this emotional confession with a mixture of sadness and understanding. She could see how Camilla's own painful journey had shaped her perspective and created the insecurities that had led to the criticism Kate had received. Despite being the target of Camilla's earlier attacks, Kate found herself feeling genuine sympathy for the older woman's obvious distress and the wounds that had clearly never fully healed. "I have never asked for special treatment," Kate said quietly, her voice barely audible above Camilla's continued outburst but carrying enough authority to momentarily capture attention in the room. "I have only tried to serve this family and our people to the best of my ability, just as you have done. I deeply respect your experience and your contributions, and I have never intended to diminish them in any way." Kate's words were spoken with genuine sincerity and reflected her natural inclination toward diplomacy and peacemaking. Even in the midst of being defended by Charles, and despite being the target of Camilla's criticism, she was attempting to bridge the gap and find common ground. Her response demonstrated the maturity and grace that had made her such a valued member of the royal family. However, Camilla seemed beyond the point where rational conversation or diplomatic gestures could penetrate her emotional barriers. Her screaming continued with undiminished intensity, as if all the pain and frustration of years was finally finding its release in this moment of complete breakdown. "Don't patronize me with your diplomatic words." Camilla's voice cracked with emotion as she responded to Kate's attempt at reconciliation. "You have no idea what it's like to be constantly questioned, constantly criticized, constantly told that you're not good enough, not worthy enough, not suitable enough for the position you hold. You were embraced from day one, celebrated and praised, while I spent decades being told I was destroying the monarchy simply by existing." Charles realized that Camilla's emotional breakdown had moved beyond anything that could be resolved through ordinary family conversation. Her pain was clearly rooted in years of accumulated trauma and insecurity that would require time, patience, and possibly professional support to address properly. However, he also understood that allowing her emotional state to derail the protection he was offering Kate would send the wrong message about family values and acceptable behavior. "Camilla, your pain is real, and your struggles have been genuine," Charles said, his voice carrying both compassion and firmness. "However, this is not the time or place for addressing those deeper issues. What we must focus on right now is ensuring that all family members are treated with respect and dignity, regardless of any personal struggles or insecurities we may be experiencing." His words seemed to trigger an even more intense response from Camilla, as if his attempt to redirect the conversation was seen as another rejection of her feelings and another prioritization of others over her own needs. Her screaming reached levels that seemed to make the very air in the room vibrate with the force of her emotion. "So once again, my feelings don't matter," she screamed through tears that were now flowing freely down her face. "Once again, I am expected to suppress my pain, to hide my struggles, to pretend that everything is fine while others receive the support and protection that I have never been offered. Once again, I am the problem that needs to be managed rather than the person who needs to be supported." The desperation in Camilla's voice was heartbreaking, revealing a woman who felt fundamentally alone in her struggles despite her elevated position and apparent success. Her emotional breakdown was giving voice to feelings of abandonment and neglect that had apparently been building for years, creating a crisis that would require careful handling to prevent lasting damage to family relationships. Charles stood firm in his position, understanding that this moment would define not just the immediate situation, but the principles that would govern family interactions for years to come. His protection of Kate remained unwavering, even as he grappled with how to address Camilla's obvious emotional crisis with the compassion and care that her pain clearly required. The emotional storm that had engulfed the sitting room at Clarence House continued to rage with undiminished intensity, but Charles's resolve remained as steady as granite. Despite the heartbreaking nature of Camilla's breakdown and the raw pain that her screaming revealed, his protective stance regarding Kate never wavered for even a moment. This unwavering position would become the defining characteristic of his response to the crisis, demonstrating a level of principled leadership that would be remembered and respected by all who witnessed it. As Camilla's screaming continued to echo through the room, Charles made a decision that would crystallize his commitment to the principles he had articulated. Rather than allowing the emotional chaos to derail his protective stance or compromise his support for Kate, he chose to strengthen and reinforce his position with words that would leave no doubt about where he stood. "Camilla, I understand that you are in pain, and I genuinely sympathize with the struggles you have described," Charles said, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority while maintaining a tone of compassionate firmness. "However, I want to be absolutely clear about something that will not change regardless of any emotional circumstances we may face. Kate has my complete and unwavering support, and that support will never be compromised or diminished by any outburst or emotional display." The clarity and finality of Charles's words seemed to momentarily penetrate through Camilla's emotional fog, causing her screaming to pause as she processed what he had said. The other family members in the room also felt the impact of his statement, understanding that they were witnessing a moment of decisive leadership that would have lasting implications for family dynamics. Charles continued, his gaze moving deliberately around the room to ensure that his message was received by everyone present. "Kate's contributions to this family and to our nation have been exemplary in every respect. Her approach to her royal duties has been both innovative and respectful of our traditions. Her dedication to her charitable causes has brought tremendous positive attention to issues that matter deeply to our people. She has conducted herself with grace, dignity, and professionalism even when facing unfair criticism or challenging circumstances." Kate felt overwhelmed by the comprehensive nature of Charles's defense, but what moved her most was not just the protection he was offering, but the specific recognition of her efforts and contributions. His words went beyond simply telling others to stop criticizing her. They actively celebrated her achievements and validated her approach to her royal responsibilities. Furthermore, Charles continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction, "Kate's character and integrity have been evident in every interaction I have observed. She has shown kindness and respect to every member of this family, even when that courtesy has not been reciprocated. She has demonstrated patience and understanding in situations where others might have responded with anger or defensiveness. Her behavior today, maintaining her dignity while facing inappropriate criticism, is yet another example of the strength and grace she brings to our family." The specific nature of Charles's praise was particularly significant because it addressed not just Kate's public role, but her personal character and her behavior within the family. His words carried the weight of personal observation and genuine admiration, making it clear that his support was based on intimate knowledge of Kate's character rather than simply on her position or public popularity. Camilla's emotional breakdown seemed to intensify as she heard Charles's continued defense of Kate, perhaps interpreting his unwavering support as a rejection of her own worth and contributions. Her screaming resumed with renewed force, but Charles remained completely unmoved by her emotional display. "No amount of emotional outburst or dramatic display will change my position regarding Kate," Charles stated firmly, his words cutting through Camilla's screaming with unmistakable authority. "My support for her is not conditional upon maintaining peace or avoiding conflict. It is based on her merit, her character, and her contributions, and those factors remain constant regardless of any other circumstances." This declaration represented perhaps the most significant moment in the entire confrontation. Charles was making it clear that his protection of Kate was not simply a matter of temporary family diplomacy, but a principled stand that would endure regardless of any pressure or emotional manipulation that might be brought to bear against it. William watched his father with profound admiration and gratitude, seeing a demonstration of the kind of leadership and loyalty that he hoped to emulate in his own future role. Charles was showing how to use royal authority not just to maintain order but to protect and support family members who were being treated unfairly. The lesson was powerful and would influence William's own approach to family leadership for years to come. The other family members present were also processing the significance of what they were witnessing. Charles's unwavering stance was establishing precedents and principles that would govern family interactions long after this particular crisis had passed. His willingness to maintain his position despite Camilla's emotional breakdown demonstrated that family harmony could not be achieved at the expense of fairness and respect. "I want everyone in this room to understand clearly," Charles continued, his voice carrying the full authority of his position as both king and head of the family, "that Kate has earned her place in this family through her dedication, her service, and her character. Any future criticism of her work or her approach must be constructive, specific, and respectful. Personal attacks, undermining behavior, or attempts to diminish her contributions will not be tolerated from any family member, regardless of their position or their own struggles and challenges." The comprehensiveness of Charles's statement left no room for misinterpretation or future confusion about expectations and boundaries. He was not just defending Kate in this particular instance. He was establishing a protective framework that would shield her from future inappropriate treatment while also setting standards for how all family members should interact with each other. Camilla's screaming gradually began to subside, not because her emotional pain had been resolved, but because the finality of Charles's position was becoming undeniably clear. Her outburst had not achieved its intended effect of forcing a reconsideration of support for Kate or gaining sympathy for her own position. Instead, it had prompted an even stronger and more comprehensive defense of the person she had been criticizing. As the intensity of Camilla's emotional display finally began to wane, Charles took the opportunity to address the broader implications of what had occurred and to provide guidance for moving forward as a family. His next words would focus on healing and unity while maintaining the protective principles he had established. "This family is stronger when we support each other rather than tear each other down," Charles said, his voice now taking on a more conciliatory tone while maintaining its underlying firmness. "We all face challenges and pressures in our roles, and we all have moments of struggle and difficulty. However, those challenges must never become justifications for treating other family members with anything less than complete respect and dignity." The wisdom in Charles's words was evident to everyone present. He was acknowledging the universal nature of struggle within royal life, while making it clear that personal difficulties could not excuse inappropriate behavior toward others. His message provided a path forward that could include healing for Camilla while maintaining protection for Kate. Kate herself felt a profound sense of gratitude not just for the protection Charles had provided, but for the way he had handled the entire situation. His unwavering support had been coupled with wisdom and compassion that addressed everyone's needs while maintaining clear principles about acceptable behavior. His leadership during this crisis had demonstrated the kind of balanced authority that would serve the family well in future challenges. As the immediate crisis began to resolve, the long-term implications of Charles's intervention became clear. His protection of Kate had been so comprehensive and unwavering that it would serve as a shield against future criticism and a foundation for her continued confidence in her role. More importantly, his principled stand had established precedents that would protect all family members from inappropriate treatment while encouraging the kind of mutual support and respect that would strengthen the family's unity and effectiveness. The morning that had begun with routine family business had evolved into a defining moment that would influence royal family dynamics for generations to come. Charles's unwavering protection of Kate, even in the face of Camilla's emotional breakdown, had demonstrated the kind of principled leadership that puts fairness and respect above temporary peace or emotional comfort. His intervention would be remembered as a moment when the head of the family chose to do what was right rather than what was easy, establishing a legacy of protection and support that would endure long after the immediate crisis had passed.